national festival in ancient Greece. Festivals were a very important part of life in ancient Greece and a central part of worshipping their gods. They usually included a procession and sacrifice. Festivals also included various competitions which were seen as another way to honor their gods. There were competitions in music, poetry, drama, and also athletics. Some of the most important festivals of the ancient Greece involved the Olympic competitions. Sports competitions in ancient Greece were countless and could be found in every corner of the Mediterranean, where the Greek civilization flourished. Every city-state would host a competition along with their religious holiday, making sure to honor their gods and to raise their prestige, political, ideological, and income at the same time. So the major reasons for this festival at that time was to honor their gods and also to perform sacrifices. Now let's see the Panhellenic Games. These are four important competitions which all Greece participated in. The Panhellenic means all Greece because it is a compound word. All four of the Panhellenic Games offer the same prize to the winners, which is a simple wreath of sacred tree of the respective patron gods. Now, these Panhellenic Games include the Olympic Games, the Pythian Games, the Nemea Games, as well as the Ismia Games. The Olympic Games. The ancient Olympic Games took place in the sanctuary of Olympia in honor of their god Zeus, king of the Olympian gods. Now, here is a narrative on the Olympic.
The ancient Greek Olympics, 776 BC to 393 AD. The modern Olympic Games started in 1896 by Pierre de Coubertin, a French baron. After the French defeated the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, it was thought that the French youth didn't have enough physical training. This formed the idea of creating the modern Olympic Games when archaeological research discovered new facts about the ancient Greek Olympic Games. It was between 1875 and 1881 that the ruins of the site of the ancient games were uncovered. The Olympic Games began in ancient Greece in July 776 BC at Olympia. As a festival with athlete events staged to honor the god Zeus, the Olympics also united individual Greek city-states and colonies in competition. The first Olympic Games happened at a time when there wasn't a sense of being Greek. This common identity only came up after the Greco-Persian Wars of 492 through 449 BC. So everyone who participated in the first Olympic Games did not identify himself as Greek, but as a citizen from the city he had come from. It isn't known why Olympia was chosen as the site for the Games, despite that the fact Mount Olympus was clearly a sacred place for the Greeks. Because it was a sacred place, it was chosen to hold the Games, and that's why a great part of the Olympics was occupied by religious ceremonies. In anticipation of the Games, messengers were dispatched to announce a truce, or ekekairia, among all Greek city-states and colonies. This temporarily halted all wars and facilitated safe travel to Olympia. The Games were held over the course of one day until 684 BC. At that point, they were expanded to 3 days. During the 5th century BC, the Olympics were further extended to a 5-day event. The Olympics were held every 4 years. From 776 BC to 393 AD, there were 293 consecutive Olympic Games. Before the Games began, an opening ceremony would take place. There was a procession of all competitors to the home of the competition, Olympia. Once they had arrived in Olympia, all participants would swear an oath to the crowd and to the gods that they would abide by all rules and compete against each other with honor and respect. 100 oxen were also sacrificed to Zeus in the most important religious ceremony of the Games. The only event held at the first Olympic Games in 776 BC was a foot race called the Stadion. The race was 600 Greek Olympic feet in distance, one stade. The first winner was Korybos from the city of Elis. In 724 BC, a second event, the Diabolos, was introduced. Twice as long as the Stadion, a distance race, the Dolichos, first appeared at the 720 BC Games. The Dolichos varied in length anywhere from 7 to 24 stades, but the most common distance was roughly 11,811 feet, or 3,600 meters. The track was made of sand with grooves indicating start and finish lines. An additional running event, the race in armor, was added in 520 BC. Interestingly enough, only men were allowed to participate for all the events other than the equestrian events. Participants competed completely nude. This allowed for freedom of movement and no contraband on one's body. Wrestling was added to the Olympics in 708 BC, as was the pentathlon. The latter included 5 events over one day: jumping, discus, stadion, javelin, and wrestling. The jumping event consisted of participants jumping as far as they could while holding stone weights, which they would throw towards the end of their jump in an attempt to propel them even farther forward. Music also played as they jumped. The discus throw in the ancient Olympics was similar to the freestyle discus throw of today. Originally made of stone, participants would throw the discus as far as possible. Later versions of the discus were made of iron, lead, or bronze. Javelin was performed with a leather strap and thrown skyward in the same side-on technique as today. Wrestling was one of the more popular sports in the ancient Olympics, as it was a highly valued form of military competition in ancient Greece. Competitors would wrestle until one admitted defeat. In 688 BC, boxing was introduced. The boxing event consisted of 2 participants hitting each other until one was knocked out or admitted defeat. The competitors would originally wrap their hands and wrists in cloth straps to strengthen and steady their fingers and hands, but eventually these straps evolved into a tough leather that would often leave cuts and scars on the faces of boxers. A blend of boxing and wrestling, the Pancration, appeared in 648 BC. The only restricted moves in Pancration were biting and gouging. The first equestrian event was added in 680 BC. The Tethrapon, a 4-horse chariot race, was accompanied by the Keles in 648 BC. The Keles involved a rider on horseback. During the 5th century BC, a 2-horse chariot race, the Synoris, was added as a race for trotting mares, the Kalpe. A mule-led chariot race, the Epony, was run for only a short time during the 6th century BC. Olympic athletes from the Greek colonies on southern Italy, Sicily, and Asia Minor arrived at Olympia 1 month before the Games to train for their events. Upon arrival, they had to declare that they had been training for their events for at least 10 months. Professional and personal trainers accompanied aleptes, oil massagers, in getting athletes ready to compete. Historians believe that since the early part of the history of the Olympics, that athletes were very specialized, at least from 700 BC on, because of how little evidence there is on competitors winning more than one type of game. Winners of Olympic events received crowns made of olive leaves, or cortinos, and branches from a sacred olive tree called Kallistefanos. These prizes were thought to be magic, at least in the first days. They also returned home as celebrities, heroes in their victorious representation at the Pan-Hellenic event. Once victors had returned to their hometowns across Greece, they were hailed as heroes and were celebrated by lavish banquets and even tax exemptions. However, their greatest prize was the historical immortality they achieved. All Olympic events were overseen by judges trained at Elis. As the administrative heart of the Olympics, Elis supervised all aspects of the game. To compete was a way to pay tribute to the gods. The competitors swore by Zeus that they would respect the rules of the games and fair play. There were formal rules to every event, and in the event of a violation, athletes were fined, flogged, or simply excluded from the games. One type of punishment was to pay fines, which could then be used to set up statues of Zeus. Spectators traveled from throughout the Greek world to watch the Olympic Games. From 776 to 550 BC, the Games were held at the sanctuary to Zeus in Olympia. Later, spectators and attendees, mostly men, gathered at the Stadion, a site that accommodated more than 40,000 people by the 2nd century AD. Women were not permitted to compete in the games, and married women were barred from attending the games under penalty of death by being thrown off a cliff. When Greece became part of the Roman Empire, the Olympics expanded beyond Hellenic confines. Banned by Theodosius I in 393 AD, they were again shunned by the Roman ruler Theodosius II in 426 AD. Natural disasters and plundering invaders wreaked havoc on Olympia for the subsequent centuries. And so, it wasn't until 1896 that the Olympic Games were reinitiated in Athens, Greece.
That's for the Olympic Games. Now let's look at the Ismia Games. It was held in Nemea in honor of Zeus. According to myth, the games were founded by 7 kings of Argos in commemoration of the death of a baby called Ophilepht. Another myth said Hercules is the founder of this game after defeating the Nemea lion. The game began in 573 BC and they took place every 2 years like the Ismia Games in July or August. The contest included competitions like race, boxing, pentathlon, pancration, wrestling, chariot race, and others. The prize for the victors was a wreath of white celery. During the later years of the festival, women were also allowed to compete in these games. The next one is the Pythian Games. The Pythian Games were held in Delphi in honor of the Olympian god Apollo, the god of light, music, dance, and prophecy. Apollo saw Delphi as the perfect spot for the establishment of his sanctuary. However, other gods were presiding there, and a legendary snake named Python. He fought against the serpent and won. This is how he got the name Pythian. His priestess Pythia and his sacred games Pythian. Like the Olympic Games, the Pythian Games were held every 4 years. The official start date of these was in 582 BC. At first, there were only musical competitions, but later sports and horsing competitions were added. The prize for the victors was a laurel-wreath. The festival was held in August and lasted for 6 to 7 days. The preparation for the sacred games will start 6 months earlier with 9 citizens of Delphi called the Theoroi traveling across the world to announce the starting date of the Pythian. At that time, the sacred truce will start, which lasted for a year. No conflicts or armed robberies were allowed during that period to protect 9 citizens of Delphi and the people that travel from any form of attack. The Ismia Games. This game was held in Isthmus of Corinth in honor of the Olympian god of the sea, Poseidon. Some say the god Poseidon himself is the creator of the Ismia Games. Another declared the Pythian hero Theseus as the founder, and the last one attributed the origin of the festival to Theseus. The legendary king of Corinth The first official games were held in 582 BC and were taking place every 2 years during the spring. Their contests include racing. Their contests include race and horse competitions and rolling.